Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. England's World Cup is in real danger of unravelling completely after they lost by a whopping 229 runs against South Africa on the weekend. Pakistan are another big side that are struggling as the top four threatened to run away with it, though Afghanistan's second big upset of the tournament means they've still got an outside chance of making the final four. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is Joe Harman and Phil Walker. Bangladesh cricket expert Tawhid Qureshi will be joining us later in the show to talk about their game against South Africa. We've also got a snippet of Joe's interview with Adil Rashid, which is the cover story in the new Wisden Cricket Monthly, which is out later this week.
But crucially, Adil Rashid's not blameless. No. Correct. Start again. Christ. Adil Rashid. Start again. Crucially, Adil Rashid is relatively blameless.
He's
Joe.
pretty much the only bloke not having a stinker out there for England.
Yeah. It's been touch and go for us the last
Great
few
choice.
days. Thanks.
We need to talk about Saturday. I was at a wedding, but rest assured I've consumed every possible bit of content on the game.
How was it?
It was really good. It was really, really good.
Did you have a role?
I was one of the groomsmen. So
Lovely.
I was one of the welcomers at the start, a role I took really seriously.
Naturally.
Anyway, Joe, it was a really hot day in Mumbai. England have a poor recent record chasing, and South Africa a much stronger side setting. But other than that, bold first day.
Yeah, the whole thing induced quite a lot of anger on Saturday.
For you personally, or just...
For me, personally, well, yeah. Do you want a bit of self-indulgent context?
Yeah.
So on Friday... my beloved cat, Ned, 10 years a companion, had a seizure and had to be put to sleep at the vets. Very sad. So I was walking back from the vets with my empty cat box, heartbroken, got a call from my girlfriend who told me that the house we're just about to buy had flooded. So it was ankle deep water in the bathroom and the kitchen. So I wasn't in the best of moods, and I was really looking to the weekend to kind of provide some sort of numbing sport just to kind of relax into it and
Palace
just enjoy it.
Palace fan?
Well, that was it. So yeah, England served up an almighty turd of a performance on Saturday, and then Palace get beat 4-0. So it's just good that I'm here today, I think, really. Yeah, it was all pretty bleak. England were atrocious, and right from the start, the thing that was annoying was it was so clearly such a bad call immediately. This isn't one of those things with the benefit of hindsight, like, well, maybe you could have done it slightly differently. It just seemed a terrible call. It was a terrible call. It backfired horribly in a way that, felt quite predictable. And I'm getting annoyed with all the permutations chat, which I'm sure we're going to do lots of now as well, because I don't think England deserve to have those conversations. That at the moment, they're so far off the level required of a World Cup semi-final that I feel like we shouldn't even bother with that until they manage a couple of wins, and then maybe it will get exciting towards the end. But yeah, they're really struggling, and confidence is clearly really low, and they've lost confidence in their decisions. They're just making some bizarre decisions in terms of selection, in terms of at the toss, in terms of on the field as well.
Phil, it's hard to analyse games as one-sided as this, but the toss was just so pivotal and so baffling. It's under 11s stuff that if it's really hot, probably best not to field in this. And I can't believe that with all the discussion around data and all that they didn't look at how hot it was and be like, we should probably not field in this.
Yeah, more than they bargained for. But you have to bargain for it when the forecast is saying 35 degrees every day for the next 10 days, and it has been for the week before the game as well.
And Rashid was already ill at that point, so they knew that he was struggling, that he was sick, and they still decided, let's have a bowl.
But irrespective of that, even if it was nice, mild conditions, the only moment when South Africa have looked vulnerable all tournament is when they chased against the Netherlands. They're clearly a front foot team.
Also against lots of spin, and England went for the most pace-heavy combination they could have gone for.
They managed to weaken the batting and the bowling, which is quite a good effort, actually. So we probably sound a bit smug and a bit journalistic-y, but our WhatsApp group can be held in evidence, right? Exhibit A, we were all flabbergasted by it. Look, it was a disaster. To be fair, they were okay after 6 overs, like 17 for 1. They'd done okay, top lid bowled quite nicely, but rather fell away after that, it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, using the WhatsApp group as evidence, halfway through the wedding, I was saying, what the hell have England done? And someone said, oh, you're just saying that because it's going bad. It's like, no, look at the WhatsApp group. Look at the WhatsApp group.
Can believe it.
We had a great email in from Dave Mason, who wrote,
This is brilliant.
A lot has been made of England's positive mindset, and the answer to every setback seems to be that we didn't go hard enough. With Morgan and Stokes in charge, that felt or feels like a natural extension of their personalities. With Butler, it feels like he's fighting against his demons a bit more. He's learnt that playing positively is the best way for him and his team, but he has to constantly remind himself of that, hence the fuck it on his bat handle. Looking at his questionable calls at the toss and with selection in the last couple of matches, is he starting to confuse taking the positive option with taking the highest risk option? It was logical to be wary of the threat of Afghanistan's spinners in a chase, of having a lack of batting depth against South Africa, of the danger posed by South Africa's top six batting first on that pitch in those conditions. It would have been reasonable to acknowledge England's lack of recent experience of chasing successfully or of chasing at all. It would have been sensible to account for the lack of form among the bowlers. It feels like Butler probably has all of those doubts, but told himself that was negative thinking, that he had to shut it out, that to bat first or to pick all the all-rounders would have been to admit that our bowling was weaker than we'd like, or that we aren't as good as chasing team anymore as we used to be. It feels like the decisions were made to assert that the team are better than they know they are, whereas the real positive option would have been to back our batting strength, rack up a good score and use scoreboard pressures to defend it. So I suppose my question is whether Joss needs to embrace his inner demons a bit more and stop trying to be something he's not, or am I overthinking things more than he does? And Dave goes on to make a good point about how England looked to be building up their side in a particular way with Livingston and Moeen, two spinners in the New Zealand series, and then they go to India and drop Livingston and Moeen. Two very good separate points there from Dave. What do you make about his overall point about Butler?
I think it's a really good one. Actually, it Phil, it kind of reflects what you were saying to me yesterday, only Dave said it. It's a bit more articulate from Dave, to be honest.
No doubt.
No, it's a really canny. I mean, we're all sort of guessing what's going on in Joss's head, so we can't say for sure. But I think a lot of that absolutely tallies. I actually came at it from slightly differently. I thought, actually, completely the opposite. I kind of thought that Butler was fearful that whatever England put on the board, his bowling attack wouldn't be able to contain South Africa. So they thought our best chance is chasing, and then forgot about the other factors. That was my take on it. But I think Dave's argument is absolutely valid as well. We don't know what was going through his head, but there is certainly some muddled thinking, and the fact that they talked about the history of the Wankhede being a good chasing ground, when actually the stats show there's very, very little basis for that. Very few ODIs, none played in those temperatures. So they're kind of picking their data. This is all, again, familiar with 2015. The data question, are they picking the right bits of data? At the moment, it feels like they're scrabbling around for an answer. And the selection was a classic example of that. I don't know what they do now, because if I was them, I would just forget about the South Africa game and basically go back to the team that they played previously. I think that balance was much better. I don't think you can have David Willey batting at 7. That obviously was not why they lost the game. You concede 400, but I think Livingston has to come back in.
Quite a few calls for Butler and Mott to go, etc. But this is a leadership group that took them to the T20 World Cup less than a year ago. Why do you think that tournament went so well and this one until now has gone so badly?
Well, different conditions is obviously a factor. The fragility of individuals, psychologically, emotionally, confidence levels have clearly been obliterated in the last couple of weeks. You know, you can see just in their statements that things are not quite right. You know, even in the build-up, actually, I thought Butler's statements were peculiarly defensive and a bit spiky. And Root's interesting press conference that we'll probably come to later as well was yesterday. So there's a kind of collective stress now through the team. Also, I think, and we've touched on this a lot, but it becomes more and more evident, the foundation of the hubris that attaches itself to the team at the moment is rooted in the idea that 50 over cricket and 20 over cricket is basically the same. And what's the difference, man? You know, that sort of approach. Well, you know, we're just going to play the same way. it's going to be almost an extension of the test team as well, right? You know, there's only one way to do it, and this is the way that we're going to do it, and everything's all cool and dandy, and, you know, we'll rock up, you know, what time's your tea time tomorrow morning? You know, there's been that kind of feel to it. If there wasn't that kind of feel, then, you know, if you like, Ben Stokes wouldn't have retired and then unretired a couple of weeks or a month or so before the thing actually begins. They'd have picked a full squad to play Ireland in 3 games. It was irrespective that it happened to rain. Joe Root would have probably decided to play against South Africa earlier in the year rather than go and play somewhere else for a private franchise. All of these things feed into the idea. Caveat, big, huge landscape, cluttered, clogged up. Something has to give. 50 over cricket has given. We can come to that in a broader sense, but it feeds into this idea, I think, that, well, we can just rock up because we've played so much of it, and it's indistinguishable now from 20 over cricket. Well, what we're seeing is that that's absolutely not the case. It's a unique format, and it requires a specific suite of skills that have been sidelined or neglected, or even worse, sort of nonchalantly dismissed. So all of that plays its part, but also, you know, I mean, look, you can keep going on and on. You know, it was an interesting squad that they picked. It was a seam-heavy squad. You know, you start looking at the players who aren't in the team. If Moeen Ali wasn't the answer after the first day, then why wasn't he not the answer a long time ago? Why wasn't somebody like Will Jacks, for example, like who's an absolute gun white ball cricketer? Why wasn't he squarely involved in the discussion? Basically, why didn't he make the 15 instead of another sort of medium pacer or a off-spinning all-rounder that you know inside out what you're going to get, but now suddenly isn't trusted anymore on spinning pitches? So all of it can get thrown into this peculiar state that we've got ourselves in. But there is no kind of silver bullet, is there? There's no kind of clear answer. It's an old squad. Lots of these things. You know, these players are on in the autumn of their white ball careers. Most of them, not most of them, but some of the greats are playing their last weeks of white ball cricket in an England shirt. Perhaps that plays its part as well. But then, you know, sorry, Joe, but, you know, we've also seen Quinton de Kock, who's doing the same thing, who's just smashed 300s in a week. So I don't know. I just don't know. Sorry, I don't know.
I sort of tend to think that the different format is potentially overplayed a bit here. I think this can happen to teams. It can happen to teams when they're aging. And also so much of England's philosophy across all formats now is built around the leap of faith, like having almost like evangelical belief in what you're doing and not analysing things too much. And it does make it difficult when things start to go wrong, as it did very badly on the opening night against New Zealand, and then you start have to looking around for answers. That's a lot harder than just saying, this is how we play, and going and doing it. And I think it's one of the fascinating things about the Bazball experiment as well. How is that going to work? I don't want to drift into Test cricket, but how is that going to work when things start to go badly? And we might see that in India as well. It's easy to say, this is the way that we play, this is the way we play, shut out all the noise. But then when you start to have a couple of bad results and you start questioning that, and potentially Joss Butler is not as good at conveying that message as Ben Stokes or Owen Morgan was, then I think you run into trouble. And I don't necessarily think, obviously they aren't as attuned to playing 50 over cricket, and that hasn't helped, undoubtedly. But I think the specificity of 50 over cricket is potentially being a bit overplayed here. I think this could have happened in T20. I think it could still happen in Test cricket as well.
Yeah, I think they, in a similar way to how the England Test team, I think, got a bit carried away with their success in Pakistan last year with the start of the Ashes, and, you know, the loss in New Zealand, for example, probably came from maybe a bit of overconfidence playing that cricket that aggressive. I do wonder if England were overconfident in the method that got them to the T20 World Cup, in that they basically didn't play that much and then had a very, very short sort of like preparation period in Pakistan, went straight to the World Cup, and everything sort of fell into place. But in T20 cricket, I get your point about the format's different. All the England players play loads of T20 cricket other than Stokes, really. So, and also there's more specialism in T20 cricket. So these guys just do the same thing all the time. Whereas for the ODI side, these guys just haven't played that much. And I think they probably took for granted, actually, that they do need to do some preparation. I was reading a piece from Matt Roller yesterday. In the 4 years between the 2015 and 2019 World Cups, England played 88 ODIs and used 34 players. From 2019 to 23, they played 42 ODIs and used 44 players. So they played less than half the games, but used 10 more players.
And we just got to be careful that the players are not blameless in that equation, right? In some cases, they're being rested, perhaps against their will. But in most cases, they are more than happy not to be playing this. And that is perhaps a legacy of having won it in 2019 and feeling like you've climbed your Everest.
There was an element that they always left themselves open to this criticism when they demoted the 50-over competition to a development competition. It looked like box ticked, we won the World Cup, let's move on to the next thing. I don't think that is actually what's caused this. I think in 4 years' time, if they did terribly in a 50-over World Cup, you could justifiably say, well, of course they would. None of these young players have played 50-over cricket. This side weren't going to play domestic 50-over cricket anyway over the last couple of years. You could argue they should have played more bilateral ODIs, but I think that's a bit disingenuous. No one was calling for that. We weren't calling for that as journalists. Fans weren't calling for it. Joe Root, who's now saying they should play 50-over cricket, was not calling for that at the time. I think that is definitely with the benefit of hindsight. And we all had a creeping feeling that this could happen because they hadn't played enough of it, but none of us wanted more of it. And I think we need to be a bit careful about rewriting what everyone was saying.
I do wonder if it's a bit chicken and egg. Because I wonder if fans don't want more ODI cricket because it sort of filters down from the players in the players so clearly don't value this as much as the other two formats. And does that creep into it? Because
then we're guilty of saying, "Oh, borderline pointless ODI series," and if we say that as journalists to fans, and that filters down as well.
Exactly, and then you get the series off the T20 World Cup where Australia played a much stronger side than England did, and David Milan's at the World Cup partly because of how well he did that tour. These series matter and we were talking about like context of ODI cricket needing the World Cup Super League or not. But I sort of think that in between 2015 and 2019, it was very watchable. One, because they're entertaining, but B, there's a really clear narrative. It's like they're gunning for this World Cup, and every series is an opportunity for them to fine tune the team, and you find a little bit more from each individual, etc. And was this time it was sort of random. And Phil, you talk about players' attitudes. Joe Root said yesterday it would have been nice to have a 6-month period where you slowly work things out as a group. But that's just not how it is at the minute. And that's just how we get to play our cricket as an England player. So you've got to be adaptable. Mott said himself that he'd have liked England to play more ODIs. But back in January this year, Joe Root played in the ILT20 over an ODI series in South Africa. And this is a guy who at that point had batted 12 times in ODI cricket in the 3 and a bit years since the 2019 World Cup. Hadn't scored 100 and was also, in not playing the South Africa series, was basically agreeing not to play an ODI for 14 months in the lead up to the New Zealand series just before the World Cup.
And at the time, Joe said, well, I know my 50-over game inside out, and the only way I'm going to improve it is by playing 20-over cricket. And so again, the line has been smudged to become almost indistinguishable in how they see the white ball cricket. That it's all of a blob. Well, perhaps it is. I don't know, but I don't see it like that personally. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks gives credence to that point. More broadly, it was incredible press conference by Joe, really, and fair play to him. He's kind of got to a point now where he's just not going to bother mincing his words. Fair play. But to say in the midst of a World Cup, quote, there's talk of whether this format's relevant anymore anyway in international cricket, right? Now, that's almost, you can stick that on the front of a magazine cover. We might yet anyway. Do you know what? It's a serious thing to say in the midst of your own World Cup campaign.
Whilst also questioning whether the blast has a role to play, which, he is smart enough to know the ramifications of what a statement like that does and the amount of bats that gets up in county cricket.
Yeah, exactly. He's saying, right, you got the 100, you got the blast, you got the One Day Cup, and you got international cricket. Something's got to give. And it's his way of saying, look, we can't manage all of this as players. But the sanctity of his position is undermined a little bit by that example. South Africa are, after India, the best team in this tournament. Go and play them. But then, they will say, well, Root's given everything, and people would be right to point this out. That Root's given everything to English cricket. Why isn't he allowed a little bit of flex?
And he does point out it is different for England because of how much Test cricket England play. England play more Test cricket than everyone. and therefore England's schedule is harder to fit ODI cricket around. But it is possible. I mean, like, look at India play so much cricket. They play so much ODI cricket as well, and have actually it's felt similar to England in 2019. And this is a side who's identified a home World Cup ages in advance to be like, we are going to be 100% prepared for this thing, and they are. Like everyone has played lots of cricket in the build up to it.
I just want to say en route, by the way, it's announced an hour before we came on to do this thing. He's accepted a 3-year contract. It's a 3-year central contract with England. I think we'll come to the specifics of who's in and who's not, who's taken 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, and so on. But again, that's another significant symbolic position that Root has taken up. So his commitment to England overall is absolutely unquestioned. He's one of the all-timers, as we know. But his statements yesterday spoke of somebody who's individually and probably as a voice of the collective as well, uneasy with the state of play, uneasy with the format, and in the end, what it speaks to is we're not playing very good cricket, and we don't really know why.
It is a bit undignified, though, isn't it? And he is usually a guy that carries with himself with a lot of dignity to talk about the format perhaps not being that relevant anymore anyway. The day that Afghanistan pulled off a great World Cup shock in beating Pakistan, and now the question is, are they even shocks when Afghanistan win these games? Because when they play the good teams, which they don't often get a chance to do they seem to beat them. That doesn't look great.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And, I used the word entitled the other week, and it's always a tricky thing, but it feels a bit like that. It feels a little bit like, well, there's kind of one game that we're playing here, and to hell with the kind of the world landscape. The truth of it is that 50 over cricket is the central driver to most under-financed, disadvantaged cricketing nations, especially at that level. The sort of so-called sort of financial second and third tier. 50 over cricket is the central driver of their cricket, and so it's easy for us as a cricketing culture to say, well, it's not really about what makes money. It's about bums on seats, and it's about player welfare and so on. Well, say that to Afghanistan. Say that to New Zealand.
Some news around England's World Cup squad. Reece Topley's been ruled out of the tournament. Bryden Cass has been brought in for him. Obviously, terrible blow for Topley, who's had a horrendous run with injuries over the course of his career and at World Cups in particular. On paper, it's like for like, but Cass is someone who never opens the bowling, so I actually think this gives England a bit more flexibility with the ball than they previously had.
Well, they'll have to bring Wokes back for Thursday, I think. Personally, I think. Because who else is going to bowl with the new ball?
Could be Atkinson.
It could be, but it's a big ask. Personally, I wouldn't go that way. I'd bring Wokes back and try and back him and pump him up a bit.
Get Livingston back in the team as well.
Heartbreaking for Topley. Absolutely devastating for him, because he's been far and away England's best seamer. He bowled well. He'd nicked off the cock. And then that happens again. It was... Look, obviously, it was a disaster from top to bottom, full of peculiar decisions and lots of bad cricket. But it was also one of those nightmarish days where everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. And
the pathos of it all with just cutting to his dad in the crowds
over
and over again.
Constantly.
Who's been there. I mean, he's always there. Wherever they're playing, he's there. So he's been there for all the horrible injuries that his son's suffered.
Yeah.
And not making excuses at all, but just running through the first 6 or 7 overs of England's innings, you could have predicted before a ball was bowled when you're chasing that, and you shouldn't have been batting in the first place. That Bairstow gets caught in the boundary, Milan tickles one down the leg side, and Root picks out leg slip, all in the first 6 overs. You could have absolutely put your mortgage on that happening.
Some more England news. So today, the ECB have announced a new raft of central contracts, and for the first time, multi-year contracts. It covers both red and white ball players, and it considers the likelihood of players featuring in England teams across formats over the next period, so the next 3 years. It's the first time they've ever done it. 29 players have received central contract offers, 18 multi-year contracts, 8 one-year contracts, and 3 developmental contracts. Obviously, that's a lot of players. Headlines from that, I guess: Brook, Root, and Wood are the only 3 players to get 3-year contracts. Ben Stokes is on a 1-year contract, but he was reportedly offered a 3-year deal, but only accepted the 1. Gus Atkinson, Bryden Cast, Matt Potts and Josh Tongue are among the 2-year contract, none of whom have played a lot of international cricket, but they'll be around for the next 2 years. Joe, I guess this is something that's been reported for a while. It makes sense in terms of trying to make sure that the players that England identify as a potential core of the side stay with England and don't take financial opportunities that might be greater actually than playing for England. So it's understandable why they've done it. But I guess there are quite a few interesting calls and decisions made within the 29 names there.
Yeah, and I was thinking as the names came through and you see names like Potts and Atkinson getting 2-year contracts, I wonder what county cricketers who are thinking, I'm on the verge of getting in a chance of England, but now that they've got those 2-year contracts, how much harder do I have to work to force my way into that setup, particularly when there's that sense that county cricket maybe isn't considered as a particularly useful indicator for Test cricket anyway amongst the England setup. So now you've got players who are essentially committed to the England setup for 2 years without necessarily having much evidence of doing it on Test level. I think all those players are... Josh Tongue, I think, is going to be a really good Test bowler. Potts' county record is so good and he's shown sides of England that it's fair enough. But yeah, 2 years does feel a bit odd. Mark Wood getting 3 for a fast bowler in his 30s who's had lots of injury problems. That is clearly England saying, look, you are ours. We don't want you going and playing, or we want you playing the minimum of T20 cricket. And it definitely, I mean, you assume that now that he's signed that contract, that he will be playing all the Test cricket that England have, rather than potentially there was talk of him missing the start of the India tour. This essentially is a move to try and stop those things happening. And we'll see whether that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, the Mark Wood one raised an eyebrow or two, but I'm personally delighted with it, really, because I think they recognise that he's a special talent that needs to be protected and managed. There would also have been some cold, hard negotiating taking place because he would have had real leverage in those discussions. Up to a point, it would have been a case of, well, show me what you've got, and I'll see what I'm prepared to sign. But that's fair enough. That's the landscape now, and the fact that he has signed it is a good thing. He's a kind of, it's like a museum piece, isn't he, Mark Wood? You know, you have to be very careful walking across the marble floor with him, and hopefully this now means that England can basically entirely control his schedule over the next few years with a degree of give and take. You know, you wouldn't want to stand in the way of an IPL gig if it were to come around, and I don't think they would do now. Rob Key walks a relatively fine tightrope because he wants to retain. He's kind of got a sort of laissez-faire kind of approach to the job, and in good times it works great. I think he's done well here. First impression, having just seen the list, I think he's done well here, but he's walking a fine line between being a boss and a mate as well. And I think he has an awareness that you have to keep the players happy because otherwise they might just say, well, thanks, but no thanks. There are further challenges ahead, I think, for that. And, you know, if England really do bum out of this World Cup, then there'll be some trickier decisions that he's going to have to face, and he's faced up until now. Overall, I think to have Brook and Root and Wood tied to 3-year contracts, I think that's a real sign of intent and reflects well on all of them that they're prepared to sign them. Brook in particular, who has the world at his feet.
Intriguing with
Stokes, what do you think then, Joe?
Well, so Will McPherson reporting in the Telegraph that he was offered a 3-year contract and he signed a 1-year contract, which will obviously raise questions about how he views his medium-term future. He'd said he wanted to play in another Ashes series, I think he said that, hasn't he? I thought he said that in the aftermath. But this would obviously raise doubts about whether that's realistic, and that might not be. It's different with Stokes because his body is clearly not reliable anymore. Does he even have the appetite to play that much cricket if he can't be an all-rounder? He's talked about that being a frustration to him. It looks increasingly unlikely that he's going to be able to be a genuine all-rounder. Maybe that will hasten his departure from international cricket, which would be a crying shame, but you could kind of see it happening.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't that surprised by the Stokes thing because I would have almost have been surprised if he committed to 3 years. This gives him flexibility. It's the same deal that he had anyway before. And yeah, I guess I can understand why players might be hesitant to agree to these deals, because like if you look at the 3 players who got the 3-year deals, Brook, that's I think the most encouraging acceptance of the 3-year deals. But Root doesn't get he hardly boosted his IPL credentials this year when he got an IPL chance, and Mark Wood will be just about to turn 37 in 3 years' time, so he's obviously going to take it. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the players who accepted 2-year contracts really battled with what that actually means down the line.
On Stokes, it didn't alarm me at all personally. I think he plays Test cricket for as long as he can physically, and I don't think he plays any more white ball cricket basically after this. He might be persuaded to see it out to a T20 World Cup, but
it's in the Caribbean this time, so
yeah, it might be all right next summer. But I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see him play white ball cricket again ever for England. I wouldn't be surprised.
And that's a good point. And none of the multi-year contracts are held by anyone who plays purely Test cricket, I think.
Crawley's 2 years, but Crawley's going to be playing white ball cricket.
Yeah, Pope is 2 years as well. It's interesting. The actually look at the 1-year contract. A lot of the Test guys are 1 year. So Ollie Robinson, Jack Leach, Ben Folkes, or 1 year contracts.
So that's what I was going to say. So if Stokes sees himself as just a Test cricketer from this point, as Phil's suggesting, which would make sense, then that does tally with him being just having a 1 year contract.
Going back to something you said earlier, Joe, I do wonder, looking at those guys, those inexperienced guys on 2-year contracts, if I've thought this more and more recently, if the England cricket team sort of feels increasingly like a football club, in that you're sort of either in it or you're not. And you know, what do you think if you're a county player, who, as you say, you're on the cusp of the England squad, and some guys who haven't played Test cricket, got a 2-year contract? Surely those guys are going to be preferred if there's a 50-50 decision. And, you know, we've talked about it before in the pod, but, you know, Liam Dawson is someone who should be playing some England cricket this winter, and he's got financial opportunities elsewhere, and he's not part of the 28 cricketers or whatever.
Is he not? He's not got anything.
He's not got anything. He might have been offered, we don't know. But,
sure. Yeah, good point.
I think that is interesting, that quite a few players who are right at the start of their international careers have been offered multi-year contracts. Anyway, Adil Rashid is one player who's got a multi-year contract. He's on a 2-year deal, but more excitingly, he's the cover star of the new Wisden Cricket Monthly. Joe, you spoke to him a few weeks ago. What was that like?
Yeah, he was actually in the cab on the way to the airport, heading out to India for the World Cup. We were all feeling optimistic at that stage. I'm glad I spoke to him then rather than now, really. It was a really good interview. I hadn't spoken to him one-on-one for a few years, and previously he'd been a bit of a tricky interview, always very courteous and polite, but just was quite guarded, didn't necessarily say a huge amount. You'd kind of look back at your transcript and not be quite sure what you were doing with what he'd told you, because he played it safe, and certainly as coming through very young, you could understand why he did that. But I think he's now reached that point in his career. He's 35. He's won 2 World Cups, and he's full of confidence in his own ability, and he's got a much clearer voice now. And he was, I thought, a really interesting guy to speak to. And he spoke. We went right back to the start, right back to the very start, actually, when he took 10 for as a 14-year-old in a Yorkshire League game, Bradford League game. And then his early struggles with England. And he was quite upfront. He said English cricket just didn't understand leg spin right up until Owen Morgan's arrival, and talked about the confidence that playing under Morgan gave him. Said that I wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for Morgan and the belief that he gave him, and the trust to maybe go for a few runs, but as long as you're taking wickets, you're doing your job. I did ask him right at the end if there was any chance of him going to India, Moeen style, late call up from Ben Stokes replying to a text message, because he had said right at the start of last summer that McCullum had been in touch and it was something he might consider, but he said no, absolutely not. And he just gave the impression of a guy,
nobody's fault.
Yeah, but he gave the impression of someone who is entirely at peace with the career that he's carved out for himself, and he's made some brave decisions. When he decided to sign a white ball only contract with Yorkshire, that was met with horror by a lot of people, certainly at Yorkshire, but much more widely than that, because it was a sign of, well, really where we've come to. But actually, England have got his prime years as a white ball bowler, and he's been better for it. And we know his shoulder's been a thing that he's had to manage. If he'd played Test cricket, every chance we wouldn't have seen him play as much white ball cricket as we have.
Yeah. I'm not just saying it, it's a brilliant piece of work. Have you read it, Yaz?
Nope.
Yeah, it's really good. We discussed what we were going to do with the traditionally tricky mid-tournament issue. And we landed on Rashid for two reasons. One, he occupies a kind of enigmatic position in English cricket, right? He's done something that no one else has got near to doing in its history, i.e. really properly flourish, I say in its history, in its post-war history, before people can't get at me. He's done something on a world level to a world-class degree that no one else has done before. So on the one hand, that happens and we almost take it for granted because we don't understand it almost, right? It's such an outlier. And then there's the social side of it, the socioeconomic side of it, the fact that he learnt his cricket in the basement of his dad's, 2 up, 2 down in Bradford, where his dad essentially fashioned an area in the basement for him to practice the game. And he emerged from working class Bradford to become what he is. And again, that in itself is a madness when you consider how increasingly small and narrow the path is to get to this point of excellence in English cricket. And then you have Adil Rashid. So these two factors, and it kind of feeds into this idea that we don't quite understand what we've been living with this lad, and because he's not a kind of he doesn't have a podcast. He's not sort of particularly famous. You wouldn't recognise him. Your average sporting fan wouldn't recognise him in the street. And so it's like he's kind of weaved his brand of genius in the shadows a little bit of English cricket, But it was high time that someone put him on the front cover of a magazine.
But this is the thing, like you never really think of him before a tournament because you're like, well, he does that so much better than anyone else. You don't even think about it. His role doesn't really change. He is the guy who bowls 10 overs of spin or 4 overs of spin, and England don't have anyone else who can do that. And so as a result, you never really talk about him before a tournament.
No, and I guess with the World Cup in India, there was an additional sense that if England were going to go far in the tournament, he had to have a really good tournament.
Still could happen.
And also, he has had a good tournament. He bowled beautifully against Afghanistan. He bowled nicely against South Africa, particularly when you consider he was sort of walking off the pitch to throw up every couple of hours. So yeah, we got lucky. Well, no, not lucky. He's a good player, and we put him on the cover, and he's turned out to play well.
Timing.
So it's not that much luck, I suppose.
Well, here is a snippet of Joe's conversation with Rashid. You can read the full write-up of it in the latest WCM.
I wonder, was it always leg spin for you, right from the very start?
Yeah, it's always leg spin. My dad got me into leg spin at the age of probably 8. I can't remember, 7, 8, something like that. So it's always been leg spin and batting. Yeah, it's always been leg spin and batting.
And did the leg spin, was it something that came naturally to you? Was the googly coming along pretty quickly? Was the leg break there?
Yeah, it came very natural. Obviously, my dad told me whatever he knew, and there had a few coaches come along the way. But it was fairly natural in that sense. But obviously, with that natural talent, or whatever you say, you got to put in the hard work, you got to put the yards in, and keep practicing and bowling overs and time and hours.
You mentioned your dad there. Who were some of the biggest influences in the early part of your career through your teens?
No, in the teens, like you say, it'd be my dad and my brothers. They were big in that sense because obviously my dad was the one who taught me the leg spin, but also used to always take me to the games and watch me bowling and give me advice. My brothers as well, they were very similar in age, so we used to always play together and they would give me advice and vice versa. So we've kept it quite tight within the family in the sense of the brothers and dad. But then as time goes on, you meet coaches, you meet players. So for myself, I met Terry Jenner, who coached Shane Warne as well.
I spoke to Munir Ali, Moen's dad, a little while back, and it's really interesting to hear how much he put into Moen and Moen's brothers' cricket, almost dedicating his whole life to making Moen as good as he possibly could be at cricket and playing for England eventually. Was your dad similarly determined for you and ambitious that you would go right to the top of the game?
I think they have hopes. That's their mindset, isn't it? That's their mindset of, putting your children into cricket. So like for me, myself and my brothers putting those 3 into cricket. Like I say, he would give his time because he would do taxis at night. So about, I don't know, whatever it is, 8, 9, 10, go on taxi. He would finish 4, 5 in the morning. and probably get a couple of hours sleep, and then 7:30, 8 o'clock, right, we go drive to Northumberland or Durham or wherever it was for 2.5 hours. So
Yeah.
come with me, stay there the whole day, watch the game. But then I might get a duck, I might get some wickets, you know what I mean? So instead of the whole game, come back to. But he would do that over a number of years, probably starting from the age of 9.
You had a lot of success very quickly with Yorkshire when you made it through to the senior team, taking lots of wickets, scoring lots of runs. Everyone was talking about when you might be ready to play for England, this young leg spinner who we haven't seen many of in English cricket. Were you aware of how much attention there was on you, and how did it affect you?
Not really. I wasn't aware of the attention that was on me because at that time, when you're 18, I was 19. I didn't really think much of it. And plus, back then, there was the social media side of things wasn't really. Well, I was not really there, but it wasn't there. So the only time you would use was from newspapers. I'm guessing. And even that itself, if you read newspapers, you get it. If you don't read newspapers, then it's just word of mouth going around and that. So in that sense, the attention, I didn't really think much of it. But obviously my ambition was to play for England. But things definitely moved on very quickly back then as well. When I was 18, 19, playing for Yorkshire and then played for England at the age of 20, 21.
Yeah, when you first got called up for England in 2008, still only 20 years old, so still really young at that time. Did it take you a while to feel comfortable in that environment of an international dressing room? Yeah,
I think it did, especially at that time and around the 2008-9 mark when obviously I was young. But the whole environment, whole dressing was different to what it is today or to what it is now. It's completely different. The mindset was different then. How people thought of cricket was different, and so for me going into that, we had the likes of some big personalities and names in there, and for me as a young kid to go in there, I did feel at that time. No, I wanted to use the word pressure, but you feel nervous. You feel like that word. Do I belong here? What am I doing here? So these kind of thoughts do cross your mind at that age.
And when do you think England started to really see the best of you as a bowler? When did you feel like you were showing your best on the international stage?
I made my debut in 2009 at the age of 21. I played a couple of games there, I think 3, 4, 5 games in total. I think a couple of T20s and a couple of ODIs, I think so. Then I had a big break. I came back in 2015. So that break of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 was a real up and down in terms of cricket, form, runs, wickets in them 4 years. It was pretty tough in the sense of where was my cricket going or what I was thinking. So, and then I got back into it in 2013, 14, and made it back in 2015. So definitely in 2015, when I came back, like I said, as a different bowler with a different mindset, different thinking, and things of, like you said, from then onwards, I've gone upwards. Definitely has to be 2015 because the environment itself from 2009, 2015 was like a massive difference as well.
Owen Morgan seemed to back you immediately and made you a huge part of his team. He just told me the other day he felt you were the irreplaceable player in his team because of what you offered. How much confidence did that give you to know Morgan had so much faith in you as a bowler?
It gives you a lot of confidence when your captain is behind you. Not just behind you, because when you actually have a genuine feel that this captain is behind you and he wants you, that's a real thing. Some may just be like the captain is backing you, but maybe I think just doing it. But when you got a captain who does it where he actually genuinely believes it, he gives you that confidence, he gives you that belief itself, regardless if you have a bad day or 2 bad days or whatever, he knows that's going to happen. But if he knows that I've got him on my side who can potentially change a game and give you that confidence, it gives me the confidence to go out there and try my utmost best to deliver the skills, try best to get wickets or whatever it is. To know that the captain has that belief and that confidence in you. Like I say, if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would be in the position I am today. If it wasn't for his captaincy of how he handled me, but how he gave me that belief and showed me that, you know what, you are our main threat, and give me that belief. And then for myself to actually deliver at times, to show him that, yes, I've backed your decision, it gives me that satisfaction as well.
Do you think up until that point there'd still been a bit of suspicion about leg spinners in English cricket, that they didn't quite know how to handle a leg spinner, maybe seen as a bit too risky?
Yeah, I don't think they did, because I'll say more so in Test cricket, they probably didn't know how to handle leg spin. Because like you said, before myself, which leg spinners was there? Ian Salisbury or Chris Schofield or Scott Borthwick. I can't remember who. So in terms of how they handled leg spin of English cricket, back then they didn't know how to. The captains then didn't know how to, because it was all about then maybe keeping it tight, don't go for runs.
Yeah.
But at times, leg spinners need to go out there and try express themselves and try get wickets. But sometimes captains don't need that. They need people to go at twos and get hit for runs and get wickets. So I definitely think leg spin back then, prior to 2015. They didn't know how to handle it.
England obviously went on an incredible run after the disappointment of the 2015 World Cup. How exciting was it to be part of that team, almost reinventing the way that 50-over cricket was played?
Morgs and the coaching staff and the selectors, whatever, got together and really got a revamped and got a new squad together, and which they were looking at for the potential of 2019. So when we got together, it was a real buzz around the squad because it was fresh faces, young people got along, no real big egos. There was no tension between players. There was no, whatever it was a real bond as soon as we got in there, which helped massively and which was probably the biggest positive that came out of all that, and which allowed us to become what we were from 2015 to 19, was that real unity and real acceptance with one another and a real family-oriented squad we had. And that was led as from the front from Morgs and Trevor Bayliss, who came in 2015, who got everything going and had an environment for us guys to just have fun and try our best and just let us be free in that sense. And yes, you are going to hear bad days and whatever it is, but since from 2015 to 19, the journey has definitely been a real, I would say unbelievable, because if you look at our records from 2015 to 19, not just in winning obviously the World Cup, but in terms of winning series, I know no England side has ever done that before, because we won back to back to back to back. I don't know, I can't remember how many series we won in that period. We may have lost 2 or 3 series in 4 years. That's my math, so I'm guessing. So the achievement we've done is massive, and that was shown by Morgs and Trevor Bayliss of how they've definitely handled things and how they've created that atmosphere and environment within dressing room.
Your mate Moeen famously got a text from Ben Stokes saying Ashes ? And was persuaded out of retirement last summer. If Ben sent you a text after the World Cup saying India ? Do you reckon you could be persuaded to be part of their test tour next year, or is that chapter finished for you?
No, that chapter's finished. No, that chapter's finished, gone for my side. It's gone. It's gone past me for the past couple of years, I reckon now. But like I said, I'm enjoying where I am at the moment in terms of my life and cricket and the balance I have of playing white ball cricket, spending time at home, playing some cricket, spending time. So I enjoy that balance of not just 24/7 playing cricket here, there, going there, but actually staying at home and spending time at home with family, and at the same time, knowing when the right time is for me to go play cricket, come back, stay at home. So I enjoy that.
Sure.
I don't think I could be persuaded to go to India for 2 months or whatever and play test cricket because, I don't think that's happening.
Before you go on, before you ask your next question, Joe, give me a reason not to be completely downcast about England's 50-over cricket team over the next week or so. They have Sri Lanka, I think, on Thursday, and
India
on Sunday. Give me something. Almost in the spirit of devil's advocacy. Give me something.
You'd rather put me on the spot there. Well, I mean, most obviously, they're playing Sri Lanka next, who are possibly the weakest team in the tournament, although England are currently bottom of the table. But so, they are a better side than Sri Lanka. And at this stage, I'm not sure they are a better side than South Africa or New Zealand, who they've lost to. This isn't really pepping anyone up, is it? But anyway, they should beat Sri Lanka, I think. And then their record will be better than it is currently. And they'll only be, 3 wins in a row away from a World Cup semi-final spot,
so
possibly. You
didn't want to go into permutations. I think
I don't mind them.
I think they can still lose another game and qualify for the semi-finals.
I'm sure you do.
But I am slightly worried about the tournament petering out a little bit, especially now that Australia are looking slightly better. There is a danger. I know their middle order still hasn't done that much, but there's a danger that the top 4 sides run away with it. There are some absolutely massive games for the tournament as much as anything else over the next week. Australia play New Zealand. If Australia win that, I do worry that we're in real trouble, especially if England lose against India and Australia lose against New Zealand. I think Pakistan have got a pretty big game coming up as well. It could be that those teams run away with it. Afghanistan still do have a chance.
So I was going to say, so they've got Sri Lanka and Netherlands as their next 2 games. Two games that they'll probably go into as favourites. Then they would probably only need to win one of their last 2.
Hoping that Australia lose against New Zealand and England. So those are crucial games. We need Australia not to do too well, and then 5 wins could be enough to qualify for the semi-finals.
They'll win 5 on the spin, mate. They'll be fine. All right, I'm going to answer my own question now. I'm thinking about it.
I did fail rather miserably there.
Because you can't lie, Joe. You can't bullshit anywhere near as well as I can. Right, I'm going to bullshit now. Milan scored runs. Looked all right. 3 failures, admittedly, but that 100 was great. Root scored runs. Again, failed twice, but looked good for those 2 knocks. Bairstow's still a cricketer and a good one. Ben Stokes is a good cricketer and a very good one, actually. Josh Butler's a genius. And Harry Brook, I keep saying it every week, he's going to crack it eventually. Suddenly, you have a top 6 there that's not a disaster after all. It's just collectively failed to click as it stands. No one's questioning the credentials of Butler, Stokes, and Bairstow in that order. I would say at this point in their careers, and 2 of the 6 have already made runs. Obviously, the bowling attack is sort of morass of chaos for sure.
I worry about England, India, and how many India will score.
Yeah. Look, all rationality, but I'm not in this conversation to try and hedge bets and recognise what's staring me in the face. I'm trying to sort of spin a different yarn as a thought experiment. That's what they call it. Just moved on. I mean, you just forget it.
We have talked about England for 40 minutes.
Such a good subject.
A lot of people have been talking about what in particular they don't like about the tournament. I think, Joe, you're right to talk about like how amazing the Afghanistan story within the tournament has been. I think my gripe with it is that individual games just don't have enough jeopardy on it. So as amazing as those results have been, and as appalling as some of the English cricket has been, England can still qualify, and that feels wrong. You can't be this bad for 3 weeks and still can win a World Cup.
And that's nonsense, because to do it, they'll have to win at least 4 games and probably 5. So that's fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, this obviously is always a concern with the tournament structure, but I think we need to be careful to not conflate England being rubbish and the tournament being disappointing, because I think both are probably true to an extent, but there also have been some really good things in the tournament. It's just really unlucky there hasn't been a tight finish. Even yesterday, brilliant game, incredibly engaging all the way through. The BBC headline was Afghanistan win thriller against Pakistan. It wasn't a thriller, and actually that is hugely to Afghanistan's credit, because there was that sort of sense that at any stage Afghanistan might collapse, but actually they absolutely nailed that chase. It was just brilliantly judged all the way through, and I think Jonathan Trott should take some credit as well. I mean, he got quite a lot of stick as an ODI player because he is perceived to score too slowly, but his record is he averages over 50. Let's have it. He averaged 65 in successful run chases in ODI cricket. He was unbelievable at a total that you should be able to get, and making sure they got there. When he wasn't very good was trying to go beyond 300 or really, like, he just played in a one sort of tempo role a lot of the time. But he seems to have done a really, really good job with Afghanistan. There was quite a cute video of him doing some dad dancing amongst the players in the change room after their win yesterday. It's quite an unlikely marriage, but it's one that seems to be working out quite well. He's sort of the ice to their fire, which is what they've needed for quite a few years, really.
Yeah, and you're seeing, I mean, Rahmanullah is one hell of a player up top. Zadran, very good as well. But I thought what was really impressive yesterday is that I basically thought that when they lose 2 wickets, even with such a good start, they're going to struggle because their middle order has been pretty weak so far. But they didn't just get the runs. They took the aggressive option quite often. They made sure they never were that far behind the rate. And Rahmat Shah, he's a guy who's been around for years, and he's not really ever played innings like that. So I wonder, something has changed. Like, it's not just that they've just discovered new players. It's that players who have been around for a while have actually got better.
Very briefly, my feeling on the format is that if you had 9 out of 10 teams that were broadly able to beat one another, you didn't have these tiers and these hierarchies entrenched in effect, because the game is so laughably inequitable, then great. I like the format personally, but the problem is that's not what the landscape is.
Yeah.
And so we could kind of say with relative surety right at the start of the thing, 3 of the 10 are almost certainly not going to qualify. And if you're could have probably stretched that to 4, really.
But it's been less predictable than we would have expected, right? There's been more shocks than I expected. The
Yeah.
shame is that there hasn't been closer
Yeah.
games between the bigger teams, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Afghanistan is, you're right to pick that team out, because they're on the cusp of doing something spectacular here. They could be 4-3 quite legitimately after the next 2 games, and then they're squarely in the mix for a semi-final spot. But we knew that Sri Lanka were going to be struggling, having lost 2 of their big players anyway. We knew that the Netherlands were going to finish 9th or 10th, and if they finished 9th, it would be an amazing achievement. And in a 10-team tournament of any sport, if you're already eliminating 3 and probably 4 before you even kick a ball or hurl one down, then that's a problem.
On the world's biggest stage, there is no hiding place. To some, it is a blur. To others, everything comes into sharp focus. This is the time to seize the moment, paying attention to every detail. What looks effortless is actually born out of diligence, both in sport and in life. This is the time to step up to the plate. Cometh the hour, cometh the man. Congratulations to Virat Kohli, who has won this week's Charles Tyrwhitt's Cometh the Hour moment of the week for his pair of chases against Bangladesh and New Zealand. Kohli is having one hell of a tournament, 100 and 350s from 5 innings. His career record chasing, I think, is even better than people think it is. So like Jonathan Trott, he averages 65 while chasing. He has 2700s chasing. No one else has more than 17, 10 more than anyone else. And I think it's quite cool that at this stage in the tournament, 2 of the 3 top run scorers are Kohli and Sharma, the 2 champion Indian batters, have started their home World Cup in some fashion. India look really good, don't they?
They look without flaw, don't they? You sort of run through it, really. They have a very good medium pacer in Thakur if the pitch seems, and a pretty useful off-break bowler in Ashwin if it doesn't.
And you bring in your quick off the bench and he takes a 5 for...
Yeah.
But Pandya, what's the injury situation with him?
Not out of the whole tournament. Could be back quite soon.
Okay, so should be available for the business end.
So, but the selection debate is how do you get Shami in the side? He's just taking a 5 for, and his World Cup record is like as good as Stark's.
Yeah, brilliant.
He averages 15, and in India just look ridiculous at the moment. But if you're looking for crumbs of comfort, in 2019 they looked pretty good as well. They only lost 1 group stage game, and that was against England at Edgbaston. And then, that's the beauty of this format, is that you can be as good as you want in the group stage, but you're 1 new ball collapse away from crashing out.
But there was always that sense, and this wasn't how it worked out, obviously, because New Zealand beat India in the semis, but that England could always match India, or that those 2 teams were so good that there would be a great match at the end of it. The concern here is that actually India is so much better than everyone else. It might be a bit like Australia in 2007, that actually no one really gets near them. And I think Ben wrote that India had a bad day against New Zealand and still ended up winning relatively comfortably, even though quite a lot of things went against them and they dropped an ominous sign, definitely.
Over the course of the World Cup, we are working with Charles Tyrwhitt. You can get 20% off at Charles Tyrwhitt using the promo code WICKET20 at checkout. Another question on the World Cup, actually. Sam asks, love the podcast and have recently subscribed to the magazine. My question is, why is it so hard to watch proper World Cup highlights? I don't have a Sky subscription, but for years I've listened to TMS and then watched the highlights either on terrestrial TV or on YouTube. At the moment, there isn't highlights on either terrestrial television or on YouTube. Why do ICC make it so hard for fans to follow the game? It's a good question. But basically, the ICC have a deal with Facebook or Meta, so their highlights can only go on their website or on Facebook or Meta. So if you want to watch the highlights, that's where you can watch them. But yeah, it's not exactly making it easy for new fans to discover.
Would you need to subscribe to that or anything?
No, it is free. The website is you don't need to sign up or anything to watch it on the website.
So you can watch highlights on Facebook, in effect.
Yeah, and the ICC website.
Okay, that's useful to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but I mean, they don't advertise it very well. And yeah, it's not easy to find. The most ridiculous thing is you can't find amazing World Cup moments on YouTube. Like, you want to watch, there's the odd thing from recent World Cups, but you can't find the Warren to Gibbs ball, for example. Some bloke's like recording his TV. That's the only way that's on YouTube. Anyway, moving on. In other cricket, Grace Harris is having a good time in the WBBL. She hit 136 not out the other day off just 59 balls. And did you see this?
This is amazing. People have to go and watch this.
Her bat broke, and she said, "Yeah, I'm going to need another one." But just as it looked like someone was going to bring on a bat, she said, "Stuff it. I'll use it for another ball." She then hits that ball for 6, but in doing so, the bat properly breaks with the blade flying to mid-on as the blue flew over the rope for 6. So yeah, if you haven't seen that, definitely go and seek it out. 2 county signings this week. John Simpson has ended his long-term association with Middlesex. He's moving down to the south coast to join Sussex. Joe, what's the thinking there?
I think Sussex got in quite a bit of trouble at the end of the season, didn't they, for ill discipline. Several of their players got suspended for the final game of the season. Pujara got a ban for, I guess, not controlling his players. And there is that sense that Sussex got a lot of exciting young players, but they're lacking a little bit of leadership. Steve Finn has had to retire, so that's another senior figure gone. So I think they probably thought we need a bit of leadership, bit of nous, bit of experience, and John Simpson's definitely a good one for that. And in terms of Simpson leaving Middlesex obviously got relegated after one season. That club is in a bit of a mess financially. Terrible on-field performances across all formats. You can see why he's thought, I've probably done my bit here and fancies a different challenge just down the road.
And Scott Boland is joining Durham next summer, which is one hell of a signing. Non-IPL Aussies have very good availability next season. So not only is he a good signing, he's going to be around for quite a bit of the season, especially with so much county championship cricket being played before the end of May. The iconic India spinner Bishan Bedi passed away yesterday at the age of 77. He's one of India's leading wicket takers in Test cricket. He's a former Indian captain and a major figure in Indian cricket for a number of decades. Earlier today, I spoke to Wisden India's Abhishek Mukherjee to talk about Bedi's legacy in the game. Abhishek, if you look at the list of the leading Test wicket takers for India, in the top 10, if you're under 30, you'd have seen 6 of them bowl yourself. Then there's Kapil Dev, and then there's Bishan Bedi. What was he like as a bowler?
When I grew up, he used to be the leading wicket taker. So essentially, he was when newspapers brought out these lists, so he used to be at the top for some time. Bedi was part of a quartet of Indian spinners, but he finished as the leading wicket taker among the 4. If you look at their careers, all of them have one or several really devastating spells. Bedi didn't have many of them, but the thing about Bedi was there were very few occasions when Bedi actually failed. The others failed more often as well. So you can call him the one who delivered the most among them. That is one aspect of Bedi. The other is his style that has been described by many. Jim Laker once said his idea of, not exact quote, his idea of paradise is Ray Lindwall bowling from one end and Bishan Bedi bowling from the other. So Bedi was playing for Northamptonshire for some years. Ken Kelly, a photographer, chased him around the country for 4 years to perfect that one photograph where Bedi used to press the ball with a finger into his other palm just before the release to perfect that photograph. So all that added to the intrigue around the man. Bedi, that is about Bedi the bowler. Now Bedi the captain, he did things no Indian had done before. So in 1976, Jamaica, the West Indian fast bowlers hit several Indian batters, so he declared the Indian innings 6 wickets down. Just to protect them? Just to protect the tailenders. 2 years later in Sahiwal, in an ODI, India needed something like 20 odd in 3 overs. The Sarfaraz Nawaz was bowling high bouncers. The umpires were not calling wides. So Bedi just conceded the match in protest. So he would do things nobody else would do. So that made him a larger than life character. There are many stories. Bedi, you grew up in small town Punjab, and there he used to play marbles with other children, and he would win marbles from all of them. Over the years, he would attribute his success with the ball to his childhood days of playing with marbles. The strength of his fingers, the suppleness of his fingers, he would do that. Then again, as coach, he would. 1990, New Zealand, I think. India went to New Zealand and played poorly. Bedi's reaction at a press conference, his first statement was, the entire team should be thrown into the Pacific Ocean.
He was a significant figure, not just on the cricket field as well, but in terms of how he changed the geography of Indian cricket. Is that right?
Yes.
How did he manage that, and what's the history behind that?
So from the 1950s to the early 1970s, Bombay, now Mumbai, were far ahead of the other teams. They won 15 or 16 Ranji trophies in a row. There were some challengers, Rajasthan, Karnataka, but not consistent challengers. So around the mid-1970s, by then Bedi had moved from southern Punjab to Delhi. And Bedi slowly started building the Delhi team into Bombay's first consistent challenger. So if you look at the period between mid-70s and mid-80s, Delhi actually ran parallel to Bombay. And it is around this part that Delhi produced, until Bedi, Delhi had produced, the capital of the city, the capital of the country. This was where BCCI was founded. But despite the big town advantages, Delhi had produced just one test cricketer until Bedi. That was Prakash Bhandari. During the Bedi era, the Amarnath brothers, Surinder and Mohinder, then Madan Lal, Kirti Azad, Surinder Khanna, Sunil Walson, who was part of the 83 World Cup squad, even the 83 World Cup squad, if you see, there was a surge of cricketers from or around Delhi, around the two states of Punjab and Haryana, which are next to Delhi, essentially. So if you see Kapil Dev, Mohinder Amarnath, Kirti Azad, Madan Lal, Sunil Walson, Yashpal Sharma, the North was not represented in Indian cricket as much as it used to be once Bedi came around. So you can say, yes, Bedi established North India as a powerhouse in Indian cricket. He can be credited with that. It won't be an overstatement.
And cricket has its fair share of outspoken ex-pros, and Bedi was right up there in that category.
He would, I think he directly called Muralitharan a javelin thrower. He didn't care what the ICC said. When Sunil Gavaskar turned down the MCC membership, he just he let the entire Indian team down, Bedi said. Then 3-4 years ago, I think it was 2019 or 2020, Bedi wrote an open letter to the Delhi Cricket Association, Delhi and District Cricket Association. As a protest, he was making a political stance. He insisted that they removed his name from the stand named after him at the venue. So this is a man who, as I said, built Delhi cricket. He didn't want that. He gave up his DDCA membership. So he could do things like that. He could get onto the wrong side of all sorts of people. He would have fights in. If a journalist wrote something against him, he could walk up to the media center and speak in colorful language. These things have happened. They are documented.
He sounds like a larger than life character, as you say, Abhishek. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us about his life. Joe, there's a new magazine out this week. Other than the Rashid interview, what is in it?
So it's our end of county season special review of all 18 counties' performances across the summer, with some special features in there. Phil interviewed Jordan Clark and Dan Worrell to talk us through Surrey's second championship win in as many seasons. Ben did a really good piece on Leicestershire off the back of their one-day cup win, but looking more broadly at what the club's trying to do. And Adam Hopkins did a piece on Worcestershire, who kind of defied the odds to get up to Div 1 as well. So loads on each county there to round off the summer.
And on that as well, the county transfers piece that Matt Roller did.
That's a really good piece from Matt. Essentially, how do county transfers work? A lot of us, even in the industry, are a bit confused by it and the compensation that's involved. So he speaks to Mick Newell at Notts, who's quite interesting about their transfer policy. Obviously, Notts get quite a lot of stick for hoovering up talent from smaller, in inverted commas, counties. And yeah, Matt's excellent. So he's done an excellent job on that. Mel Farrell, good interview with Matthew Hayden, who gives a good quote, doesn't he?
Certainly does, yeah. It was a really interesting interview and slightly frustrating.
You got quite annoyed by it, didn't you?
A little bit,
annoyed.
Yeah, I did. Because I've read a few interviews from these grandees, and Mel's done a few actually. She's brilliant at sourcing them. I'm very good at interviewing these big beasts from the past as well. And they talk a very good game about their fears for the future. But they do it with such a sort of shrug and a smile. Almost the subtext being, well, you know, I've earned my money and everything's fine and rosy in my backyard. And I'd like the game to be this, and I'd like the game to be that, but I'm certainly not going to sweat the small stuff when life is good. And a bit of that came across. That probably sounds harsh, but that's how it came across. And I've read a few, you know, Graham Smith gave an interview where there was a similar sort of feel to it. Sangakkara as well. And I don't know, sometimes I just want them to get their hands a bit dirtier if they really, really care about the future of the game, truly in their gut. Then I don't know, maybe shout a bit louder, be a bit more militant. I don't know. Fascinating interview, and you know, good fun bloke for sure.
He's been on great form during the World
He
Cup.
has. Some good commentators actually that have emerged. Aaron Finch is my new favourite, and he's been excellent.
Shane
really
Watson's
excellent.
good as well. Actually, I think the Aussies good commentators.
Was that harsh on the Hayden thing? It sounded a bit harsh when I was saying it. But you know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean. It's sort of, yeah, I do. I absolutely know what you mean, and felt similar frustrations. But like you say, it's a common theme. I think probably the takeaway line from that, which might get a bit of traction, is Hayden saying he's no interest in having any coaching role with Australia because of the treatment of his former opening partner Justin Langer. Said he just wouldn't take any enjoyment from being part of that setup. So he says he wouldn't have anything to do with it, just after having bemoaned the fact that Australia haven't employed any of the legends from that side to be part of the setup. So again, maybe a little bit of conflict in his quotes there. Other stuff, Taha's done a really good interview with Zafar Ansari, who was part of the board for the ICEC report. So it's a bit about that. It's a bit about Zafar's relationship with the game in general, which he's fascinating on. Obviously, hugely intelligent bloke, really articulate, thinks really interestingly about the game, and has this quite complicated relationship with it. Obviously retired as an international cricketer, age 25, and still loves the game, but also wants some distance from it. And other stuff, you did a bit on Alistair Cook's retirement, which I suppose sort of went a little bit under the radar, probably deliberately on Cook's part, I think, and that's sort of the heart of your piece as well.
Yeah, I'd forgotten I'd done that. Yeah. Lots of stuff. Did you mention the Jennings thing?
No, so part of my Procreation series on sort of the journeys of cricketers to the top, spoke to Keaton Jennings and his dad Ray, who is a legendary South African wicketkeeper from the apartheid era, so didn't play international cricket, played against some of the rebel sides that toured, but is hugely revered in South Africa and coached the national side, and is quite a formidable bloke. And I think Keaton had, how do I put it, learned cricket the hard way. I would say he still calls his dad coach rather than even now.
Wow.
That was insisted upon by Ray when they used to do nets. He said, "You're not allowed to call me dad. You have to call me coach."
And the sign-off line from Ray was something like, you know, Keaton's, you know, a good player, but as a son, he's 10 out of 10. Something like that.
He's in my world. He's in my world 11.
He's
as a
in
son.
my world
He's in
11.
my world 11.
As a son. Beautiful sign-off.
Fantastic.
But yeah, Keaton's. They're both really honest. And usually I do these pieces where I interview the the son or daughter separately from the parent, and this time I decided to do them both together, and I was glad I did, because there was it felt a little bit like a therapy session at times, but quite an enjoyable one. I think we all came away having taken something from it.
Nice.
There's probably loads of other stuff as well, but that's plenty to be getting on with.
Yeah. Well, as ever, you can get all that from wisden.com/shop. And as always, I'll say it's really good value for what you get. That much content. It's all excellent, and actually quite a lot cheaper than a lot of other sports magazines, and you get more. Anyway, next up, Cricket 24 is the culmination of a decade of cricket video game development and includes teams from every corner of the globe. Earlier on, Ben spoke to Mike from the Cricket 24 team to talk about the new game.
So we're now joined by Mike Merrin, Big Ant's Director of Development, to talk about Cricket 24, which is out. Mike, I guess the first thing is, a lot of people will be familiar with it, but actually there'll be quite a lot of our listeners who are just getting back into gaming, or whatever it might be. Can you give like the basic rundown of how the game works, and I guess what sets it apart from other cricket games people might have played in the past?
The big thing with Big Ant cricket games as well is we've now, this is our 10th year of doing cricket games. So we started with Don Bradman cricket back in 2014 it released, so I suppose strictly speaking 9 years, but for us we've been working on it for cricket for at least 10 or 11, and it's evolved over obviously that kind of decade of time. We kind of almost revolutionized, I suppose it's a kind of strong word, but I think we did revolutionize what cricket games were about and how they actually were controlled and what they meant. I mean, so much so now that I think there's not been a single rival to us in the console market in that time. I think people have been too scared to try and compete against us. So it's obviously been from that revolution, we've kind of evolved over 10 years to kind of get to the game that we've got now. Improving, whether it be the batting mechanics and how you actually play the game, through to the bowling, adding extra profiles to the bowling side of things. So whether you've got a Mitchell Stark or a Josh Hazlewood or a Stuart Broad or a James Anderson that are actually using their animations, not just their face in the game, it kind of comes across as a more immersive kind of feeling to what the game's about. So we've really built on that as we've gone through the process. It's been an evolution over 10 years of trying to bring in more elements of what makes cricket as immersive as it can be. It's an interesting sport because you've got people that are on one side of the spectrum are, okay, well, I'm playing a test match, I want to make sure I can block all the time, to the people that are like, well, I want to play a T20 and smash the thing for 6. So trying to get that right in a cricket game where you've got to try and cater to everybody is obviously a pretty interesting exercise to try and make sure that's correct.
Yeah, I was trying to think about what makes it different even to other sports games, not just other cricket games. And it feels like cricket's so much more about, is about decisions as well, as is the game, obviously, but it's about like technique as well. And that is what really comes through, isn't it? With playing a cover drive isn't just about pressing one button. It's about, there are so many aspects that go into getting the timing right and to getting the placement and to picking the ball as well. That feels really as accurate as it can be when you're holding something in your hand rather than actually got a bat and a helmet and pads on and stuff.
Again, as I said, we revolutionized those controls and it's kind of evolved over the 10 years. But I think we pretty much hit batting perfect when we kind of brought it out that time ago. We've probably added extra mechanics, but the original stuff we put in was the 2 sticks on a controller, with left stick being your footwork and then the right stick being where you wanted to hit it on the ground. And I'm now a purist, if you want to call it purist. That's the only way I want to play the game, because it just feels like, I mean, as you say, when you got it in your hand, it's about as close as you can get to getting out in the middle and actually hitting the ball. And we have people that have played the game thousands of hours of all our cricket games. They'll turn all of the kind of aids off that come on the screen to help you play it. They go into first person view and just be as immersed as they can, as if they're really in the middle hitting that ball.
You've mentioned a few things there already, but what is new for this game for people who've got the most recent version? What should compel them to come out and buy this one, I guess?
I think what we've added is a lot more licenses. or not think, we have added a lot more licenses. And on top of that, it's not just a case of, oh, well, we've got Mumbai Indians in the game, right? It's actually, we've got Mumbai Indians, their team, their players, their bats, their helmets, their a number of them we've gone through and done animations, so whether they're bowling actions, things like that. You know, you've got Bumrah's action for his bowling, for example. So those kind of things have been added to not just be a case of, oh, there's a logo for a team. It's actually for a number of the players in there. It's trying to be as accurate as you can to how they would play the game.
You mentioned sort of the differences between the formats earlier, and how cricket kind of continues to evolve present challenges in that. Like, obviously you say that in T20 cricket people will be wanting to try and hit every ball for six, but then you look at Test cricket and Joe Root, as you know, is reverse scooping in the first over a day and that sort of thing. How do you sort of manage to balance, well, however many formats there are now, in a way that keeps the game uniform across them, but while having the differences between them, I suppose? We
want to try and this is again something that I think will evolve more as we go on with patches, is how, you know, maybe how England will attack a test match compared to India, and how they actually attack it in different locations. That's something that we haven't done in the game so far, and that's definitely where we want to kind of head towards. So you know, making sure, okay, you go into India and it's a spinning pitch, you're not suddenly going to go in there with 4 pace bowlers, and those are the things we've got to kind of evolve a little bit better in the game as we go through the patching process here. It used to be a case of, we know if they're going to play in this location, you're going to pick a couple of spinners, you're going to do this, and the game's played at maybe 3 and over. And we could pace that out and know how that works. The game's evolving all the time. And yeah, the way England play it now, certainly for test matches, it obviously has made it a very different beast. It's good, but it also makes it kind of obviously a bit more difficult for us to, if you're a player playing the game and you come up against a team that's, you know, playing test cricket, wanting to smash it around, how do we balance that to make that a fun experience for you and you know, not make it unrewarding, I suppose.
Yeah, and does that extend as well to almost like captaincy within the game, plans, things you can do to sort of, you know, if a batter's coming hard or a batter's dead batting, how does that fit into it as well?
Yeah, I mean, the career mode allows you to progress to the point where you are captain, so that's things where you can choose bowling tactics. You've obviously got the field options, so all those things are in the game to actually kind of decide how you want to set up against certain batters. In the game, players will play a certain way. You know, it's one of those things where it's, you know, you get it right and you're going to probably put a bouncer down and hope that Steve Smith's going to try a hook. You know, there's certain players that do certain things, and we've got that in there as well. AI wise, there's many things we can improve over the coming iterations. Obviously, as we add even more licenses to the game, which we will do, having more animations that are linked to those players, making those players play even more lifelike, you know, in terms of, you know, someone that's not great in the slips and you put them in the slip fielding cordon, that they're likely to drop it more often than not. You know, those kind of things, making sure that we get those skills balanced so that it's you know, you definitely have to have the right people in the right places. Those things are there, but they're not as, you know, refined as probably they can be as we go through the iterations over the next few years. And we're going to be doing this for years and years.
Well, that's really cool. And it's been great to chat to you, and look forward to chatting whenever Cricket 25 or 26 or whichever the next one is that comes out.
No problem. Thank you.
Cool. That's it from me, Joe, and Phil. Next up, Tawhid Qureshi will be joining us to tell us all about Bangladesh, South Africa. At the time of recording, it's not going great for Bangladesh. Tawhid, great to have you with us. We'll get to Bangladesh in a minute, but how impressed were you by South Africa? Another massive total. That batting lineup just keeps coming at you. Their margins of victory so far this tournament are 102 runs, 134 runs, 229 runs, and 149 runs.
Yeah, very impressed. I mean, it's kind of interesting to think it was only a week ago where seemingly the wheels had come off. They'd lost to the Netherlands, chasing quite a modest target there, batting second. But yeah, since then, like you say, 2 massive wins. Obviously, that one against England and again today. And actually, they didn't start off too well today. Bangladesh had a pretty good sort of power play. So, you know, there was a chance you thought of of Bangladesh maybe restricting South Africa to a gettable kind of target. But yeah, in the end, like you say, those batters just keep coming at you. Quinton de Kock with a massive 100. I think he was a runner ball up to about 116 and then just kind of let loose and really took the game away. And then little cameos from Markram and Klassen as well, who came very close to getting another ton, didn't quite get there. And David Miller in the end just going absolutely berserk. So all in all, the batting just looks totally on song at the moment.
And they're just so good at the death as well. I think that's the third time this tournament they've scored 140 runs in the final 10 overs. As you say, de Kock amazing. That's now his third 100 of the World Cup. Some amazing hitting. There's one shot where he swatted a ball that just wasn't that short over the leg side, square leg boundary, just over the field and the fence. Amazing shot. As you said, Bangladesh started pretty well, actually. South Africa were 36 for 2 in the 8th over. Do you think Bangladesh could have done much different from that point on?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, they started well. I mean, that ball that Sharaful bowled to get Hendricks was an absolute peach. I mean, there was quite a big gate there to aim at, but lovely sort of ball for a left armer against a right hander there. Just kind of held its line, bowled in middle stump. But it's a tough one. I guess if you look at how they've done bowling wise, they've only picked up 5 wickets in the last 2 games against New Zealand and England. So clearly quite low on confidence as a bowling group. And I just felt, after that first power play had ended, it's not that they ran out of ideas so much, but you could kind of see that Shakib's priority was almost just to kind of get through, some part-time overs. So Mahmudullah, for example, he bowled 3 overs round about the sort of 20 over mark, where really at that stage you feel that if Bangladesh really did sort of try and go and sort of take another wicket or two, they'd be sort of really in the game. But that, it just did not happen. And it's difficult to say if they could have done a bit more, maybe a bit more imaginative captaincy, a bit more attacking captaincy at times. Might have paid dividends. I mean, Shakib himself looks quite off colour with both bat and ball. It was a tough one. I mean, at one stage, I think round about that 300 mark looked like it was a likely kind of target at one stage. But like you say, those last 10 overs really did take things away.
There's a third World Cup 100 for Mahmudullah. He played really, really well, but in truth, it wasn't a great spectacle in the second half of the game. The game was done for a good 3 hours, really. The Cricinfo win predictor tool had a South Africa win 99.5% or more for over 2.5 hours at the end. It was a really good innings. He's got such a weird record. 400s from 225 games, but 3 of them are in a World Cup. One of them is in a Champions Trophy. Explain that, because there's someone who doesn't follow him all the time. I'm surprised his record in bilateral cricket is so ordinary.
Yeah, I guess he's always kind of been a middle order batter. I think predominantly probably played most of his career around sort of number 5, number 6. Maybe he hasn't kind of quite got the opportunities to get those big scores, but it is an interesting one because actually coming into this World Cup, his selection was by no means guaranteed at all. I kind of got the impression that the coach Hatra Singh didn't really think that he would feature as part of his plans. I don't really think he kind of wanted him in the squad, but there was a big clamour for his inclusion. I think in some ways, not exactly, but maybe similar to sort of Harry Brooks' inclusion in terms of the clamour to get him in the side. There was something quite similar within sort of Bangladesh cricket media and indeed social media and fans as well. So he obviously got in the side, and I guess if you look at the innings that he's played, you could say, as you were saying, that they're kind of knocks that I wouldn't say they're meaningless because no runs are ever meaningless, but they're basically he's come in when Bangladesh have been up against it. They've lost 4 or 5 wickets. They're either chasing, an astronomical total that they're never going to achieve, or he's come in at the back end of an innings trying to sort of salvage something in terms of building a total. And that's actually what he did against India in the last game, where actually Bangladesh started quite well. They had a terrible middle and kind of finished quite well. So, yeah, he's clearly, someone who's, just his longevity itself should be applauded, I think. And that goes for a couple of others in the team, obviously Shakib and Mushfiqur Rahim as well. The fact that they're still going pretty strong is should be appreciated in itself. But at the same time, I think it also tells a story about the lack of kind of player development within Bangladesh cricket, and the lack of player identification and player development really is quite a big issue, because really the likes of Mahmudullah, the likes of Mushfiqur shouldn't really be playing in the team. There should be others out there who have taken their place, but that's not the case.
It's going to take a miracle for Bangladesh to qualify for the semi-finals from here. The defeat took them below England in the table, so if you're below England in the table, it's really not looking good. What have you made of their campaign so far? They were never expected to be semi-finalists, but there's a tendency to lump all Asian conditions together, which is unfair and inaccurate. But given that the conditions are closer to what they have at home to where World Cups have been recently, I think the expectation was for them to be slightly more competitive, at least, than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, definitely. I think, they've been really underwhelming, I guess. Solid win in that first game against Afghanistan, but since then just haven't really been at the races at all. The major problem is clearly the batting. Just collapses. The top order seems to fold quite easily, and that. Just looking at today's game, for example, all the batters got out in different weird and wonderful ways. You didn't quite sort of put your finger on any particular trend there. So, obviously the batting's been hugely underwhelming, which kind of hasn't helped them. And then on the bowling front, perhaps one of the most disappointing aspects has been the bowling, because, I was one of the people who really sort of talked up this kind of group of quick bowlers, and the likes of Tuskin just haven't performed. He's kind of not played in the last 2 games. Apparently, I think he was probably dropped in that game against India, but then there was this mysterious sort of shoulder injury that's emerged, which was basically the reason why he hasn't played in today's game as well. But that bowling group just hasn't kind of clicked in terms of taking wickets in the power play. I think there was a stat today saying they'd only taken 1 wicket in the power play before today's game, where they ended up taking 2. So that clearly hasn't gone well. And then in terms of the spinners, I feel that the one thing about Bangladesh spinners, good as they are orthodox finger spinners, so they do rely on surfaces being quite friendly to quite an extent. And obviously when you're playing in Bangladesh, particularly playing in Dhaka, that surface is more often than not very friendly. So they can actually find it a challenge when they're in places like India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka, where maybe the surfaces aren't turning as expected. So they don't have a mystery spinner in the team either to kind of draw on. So they've also struggled. All in all, it's been really disheartening actually to watch, and pretty underwhelming.
Well, semi-final qualification is unlikely, but they do have a run of games against Netherlands, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, where, if those games go well for Bangladesh, then the tournament does look quite different to what it looks like at the moment. Well, thanks for coming on. Obviously not a great Bangladesh performance to look back on, but who knows? They've still got plenty to play for, even if it might not be a semi-final place at the moment.